The sentence handed down by an L.A. judge to a former Bay Area Transit police officer. He was convicted of the involuntary manslaughter of an unarmed train rider almost 2 years ago.
After listening to victim impact statements and legal arguments about the jury's intent on the legality of a gun enhancement verdict, Judge Robert Perry ruled the errors in instruction of the jury and sufficiency of the evidence on the gun charge were so great as to warrant their dismissal. So instead of a possible 14-year sentence, Johannes Messerly will serve 2 years for involuntary manslaughter minus 292 days for time already in custody. Defense attorney Mike Raines had some harsh comments of the prosecution.
If they would have filed this case as a manslaughter, and it was a manslaughter for filing, then we wouldn't have had the problems that we've been seeing up in Oakland.
Raines said he'll seek to have Messerly released on bail pending an appeal of the conviction. At L.A. Superior Court, Pete Demetrio, KNX 1070 News Radio.
Well, the family of Oscar Grant says 2 years is not enough.
We're going to take it to the next level to ensure that some form of justice is brought, hopefully through the Department of Justice.
Grant's uncle, Cephas Johnson, says he does not buy Messerly's apology.
If I go on to evaluate this whole criminal justice system, yes, I believe it's a racist criminal justice system.
The family's attorney, John Burris, says he's not surprised by the sentence.
Having been involved in many cases and seeing the injustice that exists within the system with regard to African Americans, this does not surprise me at all.
He describes the outcome as disappointing.
A small step was made, certainly in the prosecution of Mr. Messerly, but a giant step was not made as it relates to true justice.
Claudia Pescuta, KNX 1070 News Radio.
An ex-con charged
This evening, the former transit officer who shot and killed an unarmed black man on a train platform has been sentenced to 2 years in prison. CBS News correspondent Steve Futterman is there.
Several hundred people have gathered here in downtown Oakland to protest the sentencing. They say 2 years was not enough.
It should have been the maximum of 14 years. He's a killer.
Many people speaking at this downtown rally say there are two kinds of justice, one for whites, one for blacks.
If you and I did it, we'd be in jail for 20 years.
A number of people have called for violence. Police spokesman Jeff Thomason says authorities are prepared to move in if necessary.
Hopefully it stays peaceful throughout the night.
Steve Futterman, CBS News, Oakland.
The unemployment rate for October.
And if a man goes to prison for killing a dog and he gets 4 years, then of course 2 years is not enough.
Cephas Johnson, that's the uncle of the unarmed black man who was shot to death by a former BART police officer on New Year's Day in 2009. That officer, Johannes Messerly, was sentenced to 2 years in prison today. He could have faced 14.
And if I go on to evaluate this whole criminal justice system, yes, I believe it's a racist criminal justice system. This is the biggest prison population in the world. 80% of the men in prison are people of color. This is true and it's a fact. In the last 20 years, we've been built, just in the state of California, 22 prisons. And predominantly, those that are incarcerated are African Americans and brown men. That is a fact. So therefore, this whole case had to do with this criminal justice system.
Defense attorney Michael Raines.
The thing that I think was most significant today was that the judge made 3 findings today. And one finding was that Oscar Grant was resisting. That's an important finding because, of course, we have contended that all along, and the district attorney has argued all along that Oscar Grant was not resisting. He was resisting. The judge found it, the judge saw it, and he has made an express finding to that effect. So that's one very, very important finding today. 2, he found that as a matter of law, Mr. Messerly had the right to use the taser under the circumstances. Again, an issue that has been a big issue in this case was under those circumstances, did Messerly have the right to use it? The judge made an express finding he had a right to use it. And then 3, the judge, of course, made another express finding that this was a case where Mr. Messerly intended to draw and fire a taser, and by accident, by mistake, he drew and fired a firearm.
The shooting happened in Oakland. The trial was moved to L.A. because of pre-trial publicity. This is KNX News Radio. Stories just ahead.
You heard earlier on KNX that 2 suspects were taken